if you've ever thought that America feels more divided than ever. I invite you to take a few minutes and listen to this short episode from start to finish. And I promise by the end, you'll see that even in the most divided moments of our past, unity was still possible, and it still is today. Imagine the summer heat of 1776 in Philadelphia. It was thick with humidity, tension, horseflies. It was horrible. Inside Independence Hall, the air was heavy, not only with the sweat, but with conviction. They shut the windows tight to keep out prying ears, and men argued, pleaded, and prayed over the future of a nation that didn't even exist yet. Some saw independence as destiny, while others saw it as a complete disaster. John Adams stood tall, of course, and his voice echoed through the chamber with, "We are in the very midst of a revolution, the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world." Yet, across the room, men like John Dickinson of Pennsylvania urged caution, fearing ruin if they broke away from Britain. The room was not united. It was divided, bitterly. Adams and Dickinson clashed so sharply that at one point they could hardly look at each other. Jefferson and Adams themselves disagreed constantly. Jefferson, quiet and idealistic, and Adams was fiery and point-blank blunt. But when the time came, they still signed their names together on that parchment, knowing it could cost them their lives. And that right there is something that we have lost sight of in America today. We talk a lot about division, red and blue, left and right, urban, rural. We say that our country has never been more divided, but I don't think that's actually true. I think the founding generation lived through divisions so deep that the wrong word in the wrong room could actually get you hanged for treason. And yet, they persevered. When the Declaration was drafted, every single line was debated, and Jefferson's original version condemned slavery, but it was struck out by all the delegates from the South. That argument nearly tore the Congress apart. But they didn't walk away. They argued, they compromised, and in the end, they actually created a statement that still shakes the world. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but they all believed something greater was at stake, something bigger than their pride, their party, or themselves. And let's not forget that none of these men were getting paid either. They all volunteered, paying for their travel, meals, and all expenses. 11 years later, in 1787, the same spirit was tested again when delegates gathered to form the Constitution. The debates were fierce over states' rights, the presidency, representation, slavery, taxes, trade, you name it, it was a topic. They were shouting matches galore, people walked out, and at times the convention nearly collapsed. Benjamin Franklin, 81 years old at the time, and wearily, finally rose and said, "The longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid?" That moment changed the tone in the room. They all then prayed together. They stayed. They finished their work. When the Constitution was finally signed, not every delegate agreed with every single word or topic, but George Washington, calm, steady, and resolute, he signed it first. He set the example that sometimes unity isn't about agreeing on everything. It's about agreeing on what actually matters most. They didn't leave Philadelphia with perfection. They did leave with purpose. Today we have our own battles, political, cultural, moral. We argue online, we block each other, cancel each other out, and treat any disagreement as a complete disloyalty. But the truth is, America was born in disagreement. And the difference is that founders stayed at the table. They argued like enemies, but they worked like brothers. We can do the same today. We don't need to sign declarations or draft constitutions to start mending what is broken. We just need to take small steps, the kind that every citizen can do. We can start by listening more than we speak. The founders didn't always like what they heard, but they did listen, and through listening, they found common ground. We can serve our communities, volunteer, help a neighbor, mentor a kid, support a local cause that you believe in. The founders built a country through service and sacrifice, not slogans. We can speak with respect, even when we fiercely disagree. Adams once said of Jefferson, after years of bitter division, he said, "I always loved Jefferson, and I still love him." If those two men, rivals for decades, could reconcile, so can we. And finally, we can pray for our nation. Franklin's words still hold true. God governs in the affairs of men. And we need that same humility to remember that this experiment in liberty only survives when we, the people, act with virtue, courage, and grace. We don't have to agree on everything to love this country. We just have to remember that unity doesn't mean uniformity. It means seeing beyond ourselves to something that is actually worth protecting together. So as you go about your day, whether you're working, raising a family, or trying to make sense of the craziness happening in the world today, think back to the sweltering room in Philadelphia. Those men didn't have all the answers, but they did have faith, and they had conviction, and they had each other. And that, more than anything else, is what kept this republic alive.